Hi, and welcome to Visibility Spotlight Unlimited, the video portion of Visibility Unlimited, the podcast. Our topic today is going to be gender and design innovation, equity in gender design innovation. You go, now, what the devil is that? Well, let me share with you. One, I want to introduce you to my guest, and I'm going to do something that I never do, which is read someone's bio. So, first, let me welcome Saralyn Mark. How are you, Saralyn?
Hello, Leslie. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please let me read just a little tiny bit of your bio. And let me start off by giving you your proper title, which is Dr. Saralyn Mark. And when you all say doctor, let me actually read just a bit. Dr. Mark was the first senior medical advisor to the Office on Women's Health, Office of the Secretary within the Department of Health and Human Services, while serving as a physician consultant to NASA. She designed the first women's health fellowship in the U.S., helped create the National Centers of Leadership in Academic Medicine, the National Centers of Excellence in Women's Health, and landmark educational campaigns and policies on critical health issues. That is just the tip of the iceberg. But as we are in Women's Health, now I should say Women's Health Month, Women's History Month, I want people to know your history. But now let's take it to where we are today. What is gender? What is equity in gender innovation? What is that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And as you were reading it, it just reminds me that I'm old, that I've been doing a lot of things over many years. But the wonderful part is I've got to work with some incredible people such as you. So thank you again for having me. My background, yes, I think at the very core, I'm a physician. I trained in endocrinology, especially reproductive endocrinology, as well as geriatrics, because to me at the time, being old meant you were over 50. It's funny how that bar kind of changes as we move through the milestones of our own lives. And then I also did create the first Women's Health Fellowship, and it was very multidisciplinary. I always tell people I was owned by so many different divisions. I was on call 24/7. But what it helped me to do was to see women really through an integrated, holistic frame. You know, in the past, women were viewed just by their reproductive organs and maybe throw in breast tissue, and everything else was sort of that giant black hole. So this allowed me to really take a more comprehensive view. I also had the privilege to work at the White House, and I was there from 2014, 2015. And while I was in the White House, I had the opportunity to create a really exciting program, a nonprofit called iGiant. And that's an acronym. You're in Washington, so you got to have an acronym, and that stands for the Impact of Gender and Sex on Innovation and Novel Technologies. And we're basically the only nonprofit accelerator for gendered innovation across health, IT, transportation, and retail sectors in the world. And it's been really exciting. So I'll share with you what we do in regard to gendered innovation and design. I also created a boutique consultancy called Solomed Solutions, and that allows me to provide scientific advice and really more engagement with corporations and organizations, as well as agencies, both in the United States and abroad.
Well, I remember when you invited me to a roundtable, and I remember going, oh, this should be interesting. And it was more than interesting. And the round table was really having the discussion on what companies are and aren't doing in regards to gender design. And from something simple to something not simple. But I think for most people, the one story they will remember before you give us so many more examples will be the spacesuit.
Yeah.
I am still. Now, I don't want to talk about where you worked before, so I'm going to be kind-ish. But there were, 3 women going to space, and there was only 2 suits or 1 suit or 2 women, whatever it was. It wasn't like they woke up and said, tomorrow, let's send some women up to space. They knew this was happening. Was it just, I always say, not the right people in the room to discuss the suits that were needed for women?
Well, let's say it's more than that. It's just being invisible. It's the invisible woman, basically. And unfortunately, it's had significant repercussions. So let's talk a little bit about this. When I was at the White House, I was focused on Ebola at that time. That was the other public health issue we were dealing with, and little do we know that that was the easy one compared to what we've been up against the last 2 years. But I was seeing that a lot of women were getting infected when they were donning and doffing their personal protective equipment, putting it on, taking it off. And it's because these gowns and protective equipment really wasn't designed for how their bodies move. It didn't take a look into anthropometry, body proportions. So it's not just size.
Right.
Size is important, but it's not the only thing.
Right.
It is, body proportion. It's how your body moves in the environment that you're in. And we were also dealing with the precision medicine initiative, really looking at how do we look at genomics and how the environment impacts our genome and how the genome changes. So it was sort of that confluence of different events that I created a blueprint, which eventually became iGiant, which eventually became a nonprofit. So let's take a look at what we're talking about. When we talk about sex and gender, I talk about sex using the National Academy of Science definition, and that is the more behavioral construct. And gender is more the psychosocial construct, but we know it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think, we know gender has a spectrum. So we really try to take a non-binary approach to all this. But you're absolutely right. We have in our toolkit those roundtables that you talked about. We've done over 100. We've had challenge competitions. We've had over 5. And in fact, the first one, ironically, was on spacesuit design. And the winner was an engineer who developed a modular spacesuit design. And actually, his prize was an object flown on the International Space Station.
Right.
And this was way back when, before we ever talked about the debacle of spacesuits. So it is a bit ironic. We also had a challenge that looked at hospital gowns. I think all of us have put on those ridiculous things that, we're supposed to be able to have medical care, and they're not designed for any part of our bodies.
They're not inclusive at all.
Maybe that's what unites us. They don't work for anyone.
Right.
So we have challenges. We also have seals of approval for design processes, so companies can actually commercialize their design process. Right. And we have a corporate advisory council, so we can come into companies and meet with their designers and meet with their engineers and meet with their creative teams and even their HR team. So that I always believe everything has to happen at home first. You need to ensure that there's equity at home before you can go outside. So, again, those policies, those programs, those protocols, and eventually those products, so that everyone can live well and safely in any environment.
So someone must have known we were going to speak today, because in my mailbox came Innovation by Design, a call for entries. I will not say what company is doing it, but here's just some of the categories. Accessible design. Very happy as a DEI person. I'm really happy that this is finally coming to the table. Pandemic responses, products, apps, games, automobile, rapid response, branding, circular design, retail environment, enterprise, data, space and places, social justice, sports and recreation, experience design, experimental, student sustainability, transportation, urban, music. It goes on and on and on. Health. There is not one that says anything about gender.
Wow. That's really concerning.
Okay.
Yeah, so I see, sex and gender really as what we call in the NASA parlance human factor. Right. We say social determinant. If the FDA talks about it, it's subpopulation demographics. And for me, it was sort of that low-hanging fruit, because each one of our social determinants are important. Race, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, all of it's important. But sex and gender, just again, that becomes that invisible element. And I really wanted to shine a light on it. It is so, so critical from the beginning of our time on this planet. So, we can use examples. If we look, for example, you mentioned health just now. Right. Think about it. We've all had medications, we've taken drugs where we've had side effects. I look at even vaccines. More of the side effects from vaccines are in women, and it's because I think the dosage is actually too high. Women have incredibly robust immune systems, so we might do as well with a smaller dose, which would also provide more vaccine for other people. You talk about IT. Think about it. Every part of our life right now is geared into our social media exchanges, using our smart devices, being on our laptops and our cell phones. And interestingly, the tactile sensation, our touch and our fingertips, is so much more sensitive as women that we think we're pressing down, but it's not registering. So what do? Just unconsciously, we push harder and harder. And now we're developing repetitive stress injury.
So funny that you say that. When I was working with a company, and I remember we were going through all the policies and procedures, and there was a clock that everyone had to do their thumb to check in. And everyone, of course, hated the thing, you know.
Of course.
That goes to the top. That was the equal opportunist.
Right.
Everyone hated. But the women would be the ones that would have the issue
Yeah.
with their thumbs for some reason. And it
Yeah.
didn't click until you just said that. And they
Yeah.
were there going, it's not registered, it's not registering.
When I went to go renew my passport, we had to do that, and they 5 times. You know, it's just, and I thought I was pushing down hard enough. Again, it becomes unconscious. We just start to do it more and more just because we know we need to. But we're living on these devices, and we're all developing carpal tunnel syndrome because of that. I mean, I could go across the board, even just with, you mentioned the pandemic. I had a opinion piece published in The Hill in mid-February. And it was about our N95 respirators, actually our face masks. They're not designed to fit women's faces. They were actually designed to only fit really the European, clean-shaven, average Caucasian male. And it's because right, exactly. You know, depending whatever structure of your face. So, you know, it's not surprising that over 70% of the health professionals who've gotten infected during this pandemic have been women. And then if you break it down even by race and ethnicity, the numbers are high. So for example, only 60% of Asian women can find a face mask that work. So, you know, it's really interesting when you really look at it at that level, because it's life and death issues here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just remember the roundtable, it kind of clicked. Man, I was just like, wait, this desk, something as simple that, you know, that we've spoken about that was not designed, not intentionally, but the way it needed to be lifted, women's shoulders just it doesn't bend that way. And they went back and redesigned it several times.
Yep.
But when I had the conversation with them, they were like, we had so many people trying it in the office, and we did our focus and we did all those things, but it never dawned.
Right.
Just have more than 2 women try it.
So important. And I love the way you solved it. If you financially want to be supported, you will go and do a design that works. But it brings up something important. And this is what the NASA engineers told me way back when. They said, if you have a concept, get it to us earlier, because it's so much more expensive and so time consuming to go back and redesign. Let's do it from the concept phase and move it through the production phase, and then the production phase, and then the distribution. You actually have something that can work for people. What I think is frustrating is that people don't realize that they carry a lot of power, and it's in the wallet. You know, we just assume that something may not work that great for us, but we just accept it. We don't know any better. Right. But once you do know better, and that's the thing with the roundtable, is we do 3 things. We share best practices if they exist, we raise awareness, and we empower people to become ambassadors to whatever community they're part of. Right. So just imagine if people didn't buy something that didn't work for them and demanded to do better.
Yeah, it's needed. You know, you're right. We just assume, oh, I'll go find another one. Or, you know, it has to start. I love how you said it has to start so much earlier. You can't slap on for women a pink label.
Right. And the shrink it, pink it approach. I hate that. And add a flower. Then you know.
A flower. You have to have a flower. Come on.
Right.
Or a powder puff something.
Right.
Diamond, like, yeah. And just assume it's going to work. And again, we've been so accustomed to just taking products in. I remember being asked to come to a beverage company, a large one that we all know, and they had a pink can. And I looked at them and I said, what is this? I said, give me a black can. Maybe I'm I know a black. What is this? Oh, well, this is going to be geared towards women. Whom? At what age? And there's nothing against pink, and there's nothing against if you're an adult wearing pink, but you just can't assume that every product being designed, you can do a color change and then do a size change and then market it to women.
Yeah, it's that cosmetic approach that really doesn't work in regard to how the function of it is. You know, I just say, if you get it right, you minimize your economic, your legal, and your financial and ethical challenges. Right. Do it right from the beginning. But we have to raise awareness. I think one of the things that's been so extraordinary for me as we've done roundtables all across this globe, and now we can do them virtually. And you saw we did one at the UN, and that light bulb moment when we were on the dais and we looked out and we saw people's eyes just open wide and their hands went up. Because once you become aware and once you begin to see the world through that sex gender lens, you can't go back again. It's not possible.
No, and nor should you.
Right.
We're at a point where we're having these conversations, but what are we actually doing to execute and carry through the conversation? And it will always go back to what I say, not only who's at the table, who's at the design table.
Right.
And that is, are there women there? Are there trans women there? Are there, women, Black women, women of color, indigenous? Are we having a full conversation of what it means to be under the sex of female or gender? Are we having these true conversations and breaking it down and going, there's a difference? Is there a ground where it can be much more inclusive than what it is today?
Yeah. And you're hitting on something that's really important. And one is, having a seat at the table.
Having a voice at the table.
And having a voice, exactly. To actually have that, because we've all been in the room and we've often been the token, and you don't have that voice. I think for me, what has been really important is to ensure that we have representation from such diverse groups. You mentioned the trans community, and there are many issues there that we have to address. It's also men. Just because the American medical system has been designed for men doesn't necessarily mean they're getting great care. I also have a twin brother. So from the beginning of time, I've also seen the world through his eyes too. And so what we're trying to do is foster equity by giving people the resources, the opportunities, and tools so they can live and do their jobs well and safely. And I think once you do that, employers are more encouraged to create that diverse workforce, and individuals are more inclined to want to come and stay. But you just have to create those environments that make it viable.
What are maybe some of the resources that you can share? I don't want you to give it all away, because but if there's one or two resources that people should be thinking about, even whether you're the employer or the employee.
Yeah, so it's, we do corporate roundtables, and we've actually gone in, and it's been fascinating. Some very large companies, and one of them never actually looked at the user interface. They never even tested it. So again, that gave us the inspiration to create these seals of approval, these design processes. So I recommend people come to our website, just igiant.org, and troll through it, go through it. We have roundtable minutes published. We also have the seals of approval process, and take a look at that, because once you start thinking about it, you incorporate it early on into what you're doing for your design. So I'll give you an example with the health industry, the medical device industry. Some devices fail, for example, in women, not because that they weren't designed appropriately, but they haven't been deployed appropriately. And it actually failed in men as well, because we don't look at the operator. You mentioned the standing desk. Well, what is the upper strength needed to deploy a device, for example? Has it been tested in the person who's going to use it? So that's the user interface. That's part of the design process.
Is that not nuts to you? I'm sorry, I have to stop you.
Yeah, it is.
I just want, let's just have
bread and butter.
Like, you take the time to spend all this money, and it's costly,
right?
Prototypes, all these things that you have to go through as a designer. I mean, I remember working for a design company and sitting in the corner as the PR person, just watching all the elements. To get to a point to not have a user more outside of the focus groups that are paid to come in, to actually do that, have that focus group, outer face it, come back, and then not to use the information you've gathered.
I know. And many times it's not even being gathered. I mean, again, I go back to that reference man that was created in 1975 to see how individuals responded to radiation, of all things. And then it got translated into everything else in the health system. So yeah, we can do better. I mean, we see it with cars. When I buy a car, I actually see, where is my neck in regard to the headrest? Because we know women are 47% more likely to have a more severe neck injury. Our neck musculature is different. The way we sit in the car is different. We're more likely to have foot injuries, partially because we're not wearing heavy duty boots and there are no airbags. And if you have a front end collision, this is what you see. I mean, I could go on and on with just about everything in our lives. I mean, we see it through construction. We see it through, occupational health exposures, and we also see it in our personal lives. Just, you mentioned sports equipment. I actually have I have golf clubs designed for the way my body swings, looking at my ergonomics, looking at my body mechanics. I sustained serious foot injuries wearing boots. I like to climb mountains, and I had to buy a new pair of boots after the soles of my boot got washed away during a storm. It's a whole interesting long story, but I had to come off the mountain and buy new boots. And I was with a group, and my boots looked just like the guys' boots, except it had, I think, a different color. And after wearing them for about a week, I had so extended my foot that when I went to put on just regular walking shoes, I tore the ligaments in my midfoot because I had been wearing boots that were not properly designed for my gait, for the way I ambulate, for the way I walk. So these are simple things. And so now when I buy shoes, and during the world when we were in our lockdowns, I had to get I was trying to be healthy. It was tough. I was trying. And so I had to get new shoes, running shoes, but I knew a brand that was designed for women, and I ordered it. And they fit. I didn't have to have 14 different shoes around me to try on because I knew they were designed for my body mechanics. So clever, isn't it?
So clever. I guess when we could go back out, and I'm heading there now to Women in Construction.
Yes.
And there's a whole expo in New York. And I remember the last time meeting a company doing construction boots, because guess what? Women are now on construction site, but cut to a woman's foot because they said women are trying to buy work boots to actually to work in construction, and they're not built.
Yeah. So Leslie, you're bringing up two things that just popped in my head. And certainly as we're in this time of war right now and women in the military, our military boots are not designed. So we've seen women who've sustained serious stress fractures. There was one case that was reported. One woman had so many repetitive stress fractures, she actually had to have an amputation. And then she was given a prosthesis that was designed for a man's body.
Oh, can we just stop and
fractured her hip?
Yes. How about I have a friend, and this is a conversation I want to have, that has a prosthesis for her ear, which is a very hard to begin with. They cannot get this prosthesis right for anything, nor can they color it properly for her skin tone.
Yeah, so that's the precision part.
Injury on top of injury of having of dealing with what life gives you, and then what's available for you to be able to move forward in it, whether it's gender.
So let's talk about moving forward. Firefighters, we have these horrific fires in the West every year, and some of our female firefighters were complaining that as they were having to run away from the fire, their pants were falling down because they weren't designed to fit their hips.
I knew the backpacks were an issue.
You can't make this stuff up.
And it's amazing because everyone goes, okay, let them in. Okay, like it's a chore to let women in, or anyone who is capable. But then just be happy you're here. That's that is what I think anyone that has been the one in the room, just be happy you're here. Well, I am happy I'm here. Now I need you to be extra happy and give me the access, the equity. That's where the equity comes in.
Yes.
To have the proper tools for me to be the best I can be, not only for myself, but to contribute to the greater large or whatever company or organization that I'm trying to contribute to.
Absolutely. So I use this analogy in my eyes, diversity is that you're asked to the dance. Inclusion is you're actually asked to dance. And equity is you're given shoes that actually fit you so you can dance. And it's just this continuum that is so important. And I think what's frustrating right now, and this is probably a whole other discussion, is that some companies now are checking off the box. So, okay, well, we've got this individual who represents that group and that group and that group, but yet they haven't provided the resources and the opportunities and tools to do your job independent of just the fact that you represent all these different groups. And that's it.
Right. No, absolutely. I always say it's not only having the proper shoes to dance. Are you actually taking me on the floor? Are we going to dance together for a moment? Do you spin me and then allow me to go off to someone else? Then they show me something new. If we're not doing that, then I'm just looking real cute in the middle of the floor with some cute shoes that I can't really move in.
Right.
And we have to get beyond giving cute shoes
Right.
and being invited to really being able to have the voice to tell the DJ, give me that song. Hey,
Right.
you want to come dance with me?
Lucy, it's like rising tide, all ships rise. I did an event at Purdue University, and it was really interesting. It was very multicultural. We had diversity across the gender spectrum. And one of the men there mentioned that he felt comfortable he could actually share it. But he said the lab that he's in would have staff meetings at like 7 a.m. And he was always uncomfortable to say he couldn't go, but he wanted to drop his children off at school. And he said, you know what? This session has empowered me enough. I'm going to be an ambassador, and I'm going to go back and let's say we'll move it to noon time. So he went ahead and did that. And interestingly, everybody nodded their heads because the women, of course, wanted it at noon and everybody else wanted it.
Right.
But until he spoke up, everyone just assumed that that was the way it was going to be. It was
Right,
fascinating. But what's sad is that a woman didn't feel like she could say it, but it came from a man and it was accepted. But I don't care who does it. We're all ambassadors. We all can make those ships rise.
Absolutely. One last story. When I went to Michelle Obama did the women and girls at the
Yes.
White House. I think you may have been there. I was there, and all the restrooms were gender neutral.
Yeah.
And I remember a man coming because, of course, everyone had been at the convention center. A lot of people had been at the convention center before.
Right.
So he just automatically went where the men's room was. And then he just stopped. And he was so confused. And we were like, no, you're in the right line.
Right.
He, got a little red. He goes, I am in the right line because I have daughters.
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable.
And everybody has a mother. Until we change that, you got them on. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's step by step. If we could wrap this up, and you would want people to, how should people think about equity and gender innovation? What's like 5 things or 3 things? I know. That's so hard. A whole list of things you should be thinking about.
Right. Well, it's funny. I tell people, because I come from the space program, I had 18 years in the space program at NASA, and I just tell people I see my world through the prism of space using a sex gender lens. And there are many reasons for it. First of all, it fosters innovation and disrupting the status quo. Improves your marketplace share, which is just so given, and it increases satisfaction, both of the employer, the employee, and the client. So it's a really win-win. I think the challenge is sometimes people can't appreciate that the economic calculus from the start, but once they really take that deeper dive and they see how it benefits everyone, it just makes sense. It's a no-brainer. You just do it. But what we have to do is get people educated, and that's what we're doing right now.
Absolutely. So I love it. So anyone that really wants to dig deep into gender equity and what to do, please reach out to Saralyn and to iGiant. Give them your website, please.
Thank you. Yes, it's www.igiant.org.
And if you really want to combine your DEI efforts and gender, you reach out to both of us. We will come up with a program for you to really be sustainable and accountable for gender equity, for equity period, to any of your employees. Saralyn, thank you so much for joining me.
It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Leslie. And thank you so much for everything that you've done for everybody else.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Absolutely.
And for those listening and watching, please follow the Cavu Group on all social media, and make sure you subscribe to Visibility Unlimited or Visibility Spotlight on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you.